That's it.
Okay.
A lot of
Just
our
making sure.
American
It was.
friends call me Eli, and
Yeah.
all kinds of different ways of pronouncing my full name, but Ellie is the best way for me personally.
Ellie. Okay. Just wanna make sure. I was pretty sure from the pulver, from Zulus, I
Yeah.
knew that, but I just wanted to make sure. So.
It's my mum's
Okay.
decision. She calls me Ellie, and my wife also calls me Ellie, my soulmate. So Ellie's the way to go.
Oh. Okay. Well, now I know where I'm gonna be taking that conversation a little bit too, because whenever you bring up soulmate, I love always hearing how soulmates come together. So
Yeah, I mean
that's okay.
that is it's awesome. It's the most amazing story. That's the key to everything.
Okay, there we go. Okay, awesome. So I'm gonna start recording. Hi, Ellie. I'm so excited to have you here today. As I just did a little intro on you, and oh my goodness, you do so many different types of work. So I cannot wait to find out more and also discover the Myronies that have been going on in your life.
Yeah, I mean it's not normal like how divinely serendipity, all the different words that you could use that we're meant to be sitting here together and talking tonight of all nights. And I mean that for you guys it's in the morning, but that's one of the beauties that we've gone past time and distant in this whole connection, and I'm really happy to be here and join that Myrony. It's a big blessing. Thank you.
Oh, well, thank you, Ellie. I mean, it's truly my honor. I mean, as I said, you're actually my first true international guest. So
Wow.
I'm very excited. I've interviewed a couple people in Canada, but you're the first one that I'm like, wow, this is really special. And I just want to share with the listeners of how we connected, because it was actually through Jeff Pulver and his incredible networking group known as the Zulas. And for anybody that wants to join a very heart-centered, amazing group of business people or just people in general, and just to have conversation, you just go to pulver.com and register for the Zula. But I'm curious, how did you first meet Jeff?
So Jeff is it's an amazing story with him, because my family, thank God, just a little background on myself. I grew up in the music business in London. They are involved in the biggest promotions of the biggest events in history, Live Aid, Live Earth, Live 8, so big stuff that I grew up with. And one of the key bands that my father was involved with in the merchandise and my uncle in the promotions was Led Zeppelin. So when there was a need to make a Led Zeppelin reunion, which was around in the 2008-9, they needed to bring back together the two main key players there, Robert Plant and Jimmy Page, I think. So he needed someone to be that go-between and make that happen, and that was my uncle Harvey Goldsmith. And my father, who did the merchandise and was involved, had the keys for getting those last tickets that were still sort of not really available, but through the right avenues you could get hold of them. And Jeff knew my family from probably all his large networking world, Jeff Pulver, as we know, and he was in Israel at the time. And my father said to me, "You got to meet this guy Jeff." He put on a big event like a few months before called Jerusalem Rocks, with Black Eyed Peas, and there was a big deal what Jeff did with a group of partners. And my father had been reached out to by them to bring Leonard Cohen and some other great acts to Israel. So I was in Israel and I was doing what I was doing there already, like on my own spiritual Myrony journey, like really very much focused on the soul and teaching. And I was up all night. People call me the Midnight Rabbi. And I was working for a program which was basically kids and teenagers at risk, and their studio had been destroyed, burnt down by the kids. So they needed a new recording studio, and there I was in this program, and I'm a music guy, used to be in many rock bands and involved with like all kinds of events when growing up in London, and also when I came to Israel I was doing a lot of events, but more small time stuff. And I realized that there's this opportunity, because the organization that used to run the Battle of the Bands in Israel had packed it in for some reason, And I decided I'm going to be the guy to get all these teenagers, instead of them on the streets, but get them to do a massive event and get them back in studios. So I need my own studio to get that moving. So it was sort of amazing, as you would say, Myrony, serendipity, divine providence. But my dad says to me, you got to meet this Jeff guy and have a chat with him. So I phone him up and he says, I'm in Tel Aviv, come to the Montefiore Hotel. And at that time, I was honestly, like, just to give sort of like a background where I was holding personally, I'd gone through a lot of spiritual changes, like from growing up a more secular, traditional Jewish background of North London. And I got very awakened by my religion and spirituality to the point where I was very like disconnected in some way from the world. Even though I was teaching and I was involved with teenagers and I was still had that music inside of me and that vision, but I needed to not be online. I wasn't on the internet, and I was like in a very spiritual place. So to hang out in Tel Aviv in the Montefiore Hotel, it's a very nice place, but just to say the women aren't exactly dressed, like the normal way. And it's a different kind of environment that I was hanging out with in Jerusalem, in the holiest place in the world, in terms of how I viewed it then. And so I phoned up Jeff and I said, I don't know if Tel Aviv's going to work out, but are you coming to Jerusalem the next few days? And he says, yeah. So we meet by this big Tower of David, and he's standing there. First time I'm meeting Jeff Palver, he's wearing a Hawaiian shirt and he looks like very happy with his friends, his partners, people that I've got to know a bit more myself over the years. And he gives me like a big hug, Jeff style. And I start talking with him and he says, look, Ellie, I know your father's told me about your great work with teenagers at risk and being on the streets, and he mentioned something about music, and I said, yes, I told him about the studio idea and I want to do a concert. So he literally, at that time, I'm not saying he's open to do that now, but at that time he was able to. He literally handed me his card. I phoned up the place I was working for, handed over like a very generous donation, and it literally paid for the whole music studio. So everything was now, everything. Like we're talking about like a studio that was burnt out. So the walls needed to be redone, and we need to put, make it sound efficient and all the different things. The computer back in the day was a PC, and then the program and all the different stuff that we needed for the studio, the music equipment was all brand new. We were able to cover it all, and thanks to Jeff. And not only that, later on he went and continued to help me to make a beautiful Unity concert in Jerusalem, where we had like around 20 bands performing in a big event and 1,000 people attendance. And he was one of the people. I mean, I had other partners as well, but it was just amazing how that first meeting with him was of tremendous kindness. Obviously, we hanged out, got to know each other. He got the tickets he wanted through my father to Led Zeppelin, and he'll talk about that, a few times on our Zula. He'll mention how amazing that show was, seeing said back again in the on stage at 2008-9, whenever it was exactly, I can't remember, but that was how we met, through music and through Unity concerts, and making a big impact in the world that Jeff was at that time, and also my family. And it was nice that I could then give it to the youth and help them at-risk teenagers instead of being on the street and doing whatever they were doing. Like many of them told me stories about how it literally saved them from very bad situations, because instead of doing whatever they would have done, they went and jammed and they formed a band, and it focused them for those few years that I was running that kind of event in Israel. I'm now obviously changed to a different projects, but because the whole climate's changed in the last 10 years, but it was a very amazing opportunity, and that's how I met Jeff. And we continued from then on. I was getting a bit more open again, back to the real world, and I started hanging out and meeting him in Tel Aviv. We met many times at Mel, one of his friends, Mel Robbins, I've forgotten his name, but the book guy, our books guy. So we met up many times, his events with Jeff's breakfast, and also Jeff did a bunch of cocktail parties. And I came in the full get-up, and it was like, a lot of Israeli people aren't used to seeing more religious-looking people at these kind of events, but I was there, and I was totally engaged with the people and the situation. A lot of my friends from London, from my life before, came and hanged out with me there, and it ended up bringing me back much more into the world. And not only that, Jeff gave me a lot of encouragement with joining the online world. Like, he helped me get more functional on Twitter and Facebook, and he gave a lot of support and a lot of good contacts, and he really helped me establish myself online, whereas I hadn't really had much to do with it for about 10 years. I was online when there was email and things were simple, but those 10 years of Facebook and YouTube when they first started, and Instagram for sure, I wasn't on any of those things. It was only the last 10 years, thanks to that whole relationship, that I started building my online presence and reconnecting with everything before, and building new networks from all the students, and going ahead now with like the larger projects I'm trying to do. So yeah.
Wow, okay, so that is a much bigger Myrony than I expected.
I mean, you just got to picture the guy literally handed me his card and said, you know, go do what you need to do. And like, that was the relationship with Jeff for all those few years, like at that beginning stage. And always, even till the last time I saw him in Tel Aviv, which was 2019, obviously before Corona kicked in, and we met up at one of these breakfasts on the rooftop, and it was just really positive, a lot of love. You know, everyone's gone through their journey, as Jeff has as well, and he wasn't like in the same place as I first originally met him. So it wasn't now about, and I wasn't looking for donations or investments or anything like that. It was more of coming together as friends and communicating as, you know, a continuation of our relationship. And when he started this Zula, that was like life-changing, especially during this Corona challenge. And that's where I met you and all our other friends. And
I know.
And it's been a really amazing support system this whole year. Like, it's literally has empowered me to do so much positive projects, which I'm happy to talk about later on, you know.
We definitely are going to talk about that. We're going to, you know, we're definitely going to dive in on a whole bunch of things. I mean, but I can't get over, because, you know, the idea of this concept of Myrony is it's literally a more modern day word for synchronicity. However, it's really has its own definition, because it's synchronicity in motion. You see a sign, or there's something that happens, you know, like you could have made that choice. No, I'm not going to meet this guy. And look at what happened with all of that. But like all the different pieces. So I actually love saying it's the divine design that interweaves us together. It's not just weaving us. It's like going deep. And I mean, that is truly incredible. So what a fabulous Myronic story between the two of you.
Yeah, I mean, that studio is still, some of the equipment's still being used by musicians who don't have much, you know, income. They're using it to teach drums, or it's still the overflow of that initial meeting and that kindness is continued till now. There's still guys who I talk to who remember those events and how impactful they were in their life then. And it inspired a lot of what I'm doing now in terms of this concept of unity, because it gave me ability to manifest it here in my life in Jerusalem, you know. So that was big.
Yeah, so let's go back to, I mean, when you were a kid, you said you grew up in London. I mean, what you just explained of your connection in the musical connection in your family, and, you know, being a part of that world. How long were you in London for?
So I grew up I was born 1980, and I was during the 80s, 90s, those 20 years. I did come to Israel at the end of 1999, but really those, I would say, was a solid, you know, 18, 19, 20 years that I was there as a child growing up, and being a teenager with access to the music world, you know, was just out this world. I mean, wrestling as well, because my family were the main promoters of WWF back in the day with Hulk Hogan and that whole scene, and British Bulldog, and, you know, Ric Flair and Bret Hart. And I used to do modeling for my family's merchandise for the WWF, and I used to dress up in the, you know, what was his name, the Heartbreak Kid, you know, Shawn Michaels, you know, had all this leather on me, and thank God I looked a little bit more, you know, like how I did in that time, you know, a bit more model style than I do now. But thank God, you know, it was an amazing experience growing up in the more celebrity music world, backstage experience, and it obviously gave me a lot of friends. There were one or two people who seemed to use me in those days, but even those people, like you're saying, that's Myrony. I went back to London like not so long ago, like actually my last visit, and my wife and I were stuck to get somewhere, and that guy who back in the day used me for tickets, because it was an obvious thing, like there were some situations that happened as a teenager that it was obvious he was using me at that time. I'd reconnected to him like a few different times, but on Facebook. And I said to him, are you available now? Because he wanted to meet me when I came to England. For some reason, he'd been in Israel. He just felt he needed to stay in touch with me. And he knew maybe about my family a little bit as well. Anyway, he then picked us up, took us all where we needed to go, drove us around, caught up. He asked me, he said, look, I'm really looking for a job. He ended up with a job. And he's been at that job this whole Corona time. He's been the main guy. Because the person who ran my family's warehouse got Corona and couldn't come back. And he's literally become like the guy running all their stuff. And it's like, just from that, I could have said, oh, this guy used me. But, the truth was, it was a one-time, thing. And maybe I would have done the same at that age as well. And to hold a grudge and to push him away, instead of now we've got a friendship, that's even better than it was when we were kids, So.
Oh, that's beautiful. I love that.
I mean, that's just one of a million stories, Yeah.
I'm sure. I mean, that was actually when, we got to know each other a little bit more in the Zulu. I was like, oh my goodness, I need to ask to be on the podcast because I know you would have some good stories.
Thank you.
Like it really, and it's that whole thing when, doors open, we have to walk through. And, the fact that you were able to just let go of whatever that was and been like, we're young, we're whatever, it's not going to be the same person. People evolve. It's that whole thing when, people are like, oh, people don't change, or, it's when we can connect on that more higher spiritual level, which I love. That's how you feel connected to, and that's how I feel connected to in everything that I do. Truthfully, I represent God is love with Winky here in my logo. God is love with an awesome sense of humor.
Yeah, definitely. You got to keep a smile. Yeah. And, I would say also what I've noticed with your podcast is you've got some really inspirational people coming on. Like, I really enjoyed listening to the last bunch of series and episodes, and I recommend people listening to those past episodes. But like, one of the things that I would say is important at what you're doing, and Jeff represented, he also said to me, never burn your bridges. He once said that to me, and I've seen that in business. Like, it's not worth burning your bridges, and it comes from spiritual ideas as well that I'm aware of, that I've learned, in mystical texts. These and this, you have to be a more godly, divine person. And I try, when I communicate to people, to be as down to earth now and as more universal as possible, and not to like burden people with my spiritual understandings, because I do, really, I know, that's the Jewish way of saying, without the evil eye, but I do have a lot of knowledge, in my opinion, not in an arrogant way, just like God bless me in a way that I can absorb a lot of material, and like I internalize a lot of podcasts nowadays, but back in the day it was sitting in a very spiritual setting and learning the ways of God and the ways of spirituality, and it was a lot of like Kabbalistic, mystical, deep internal work over many years, but I tried to keep that very much internal, and it's something which it has to come out in a way that's relatable and real. And that's why what you said about stories is the key, because stories everyone can understand. That's the universal language, and everyone can be inspired by stories. And if I start using terminologies of like mystical terminologies, only people who are familiar with that will understand, or I have to constantly explain myself. So that's one of the things that, thank God, growing up in the entertainment world and having access to the music world and the promotional world and the merchandise world and the marketing world, it gave me an insight to communication. And I'm seeing now that I'm 40 now, I'm 41 actually, just last, a week ago or so, that I have the opportunity to communicate more and more as time's going on to the larger public. And now it's my goal to make sure that communication is clear. Now, as you're doing a podcast, so am I, and I want more and more opportunities to put that down in reality. And that Jeff is definitely one of the role models, and I put him as such. On Facebook, I don't know if you remember back in the day, you could choose different like relationships you have with people, and you could describe.
Oh yeah.
So he was one of the people I called a role model, on Facebook. Like I define him that. I don't know if it's so relevant anymore. I don't know if these kind of like a lot of things on social media, you have to go with the changes. It doesn't seem so significant now that I gave him that status. I don't think it made any difference on the Facebook algorithms, or I don't know. But the point is that having connection to a lot of different kinds of people and going in that journey has really helped. And that's why I'm really happy that you asked me to come, because you are, someone I haven't met before like this last year. And you've really also gone on your journey. I listened to your stories and it's amazing. This process of self-discovery, and I'm sure it's not easy, because I know myself, even when you've got clarity, it doesn't mean everything's easy. It doesn't mean that even if things that you're seeing the Myrony, you're seeing the synchronicity, excuse me if the word I didn't say right, serendipity, or you're seeing the flow, you're in that, but you still might not have the emotional readiness for it, or you might not have the intellectual capability to explain it, or even, you're going to be in all kinds of situations, going to be a struggle. Like sometimes it's not what you were planning, we weren't planning this year to be this way. But at the same time, like once we get that humility of life and we understand that we're not in control, so then this year that brings us onto Zoom and onto all these Zulas and all these opportunities to meet each other, these online communities, then we see that there's a new flow, even if it's not in person, but it still has dynamics that are really empowering and amazing,
Absolutely. I mean, we can look at, we should be able to look at the good even when there's, not when we say the bad. I mean, yes, it's been tragic what's happened, but there really has been this major shift, and I'm so grateful to be able to have these conversations, and I so appreciate everything you said about my journey, because I'm just here to try to help people who have felt lost in life. I mean, I was so lost, and I'm actually in the process of writing a memoir called Please Save Me. It's how I discovered Myrony, but also God and not just the universe. I was a total universe girl for a while, and it was because of being brought up Catholic. Not that there's anything wrong with it, it's just that I could not just accept that way of thinking. I was one of those people who was like, if I lived in another part of the world, that's what I would be brought up with, and that's what I would believe. How can I say this is the only way? And my personal belief, I think God's so brilliant. He's like, I'm going to give this bit of wisdom, this bit of wisdom, this bit of wisdom. Are they going to put it together or only claim one piece as their own? And I really think, God is who you find inside of you. And so that's what I'm really trying to do with this podcast, is people create another relationship to God, that maybe they can just open it up a little bit more. Open the box that God has been put in some ways.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the biggest keys of everything of life, is to not put a limitation on your relationship with this higher power, however people define it. And a famous saying of a very well-known rabbi that I've sort of worked for, not him because he's no longer alive, but his legacy and his movement is still alive, and in fact it's growing even now, even though he's not alive. That's how powerful his message was. One of the famous sayings he said is he used to tell people, I also wouldn't believe in the God that you believe in. He always used to say that to all kinds of atheistic, and not agnostic people who he used to encounter and play chess with and have deliberations with. He'd say, I also wouldn't believe in that kind of God. The God that you have defined as God, I would not want to have nothing to do with, So that's a very important clarification, that you have to really allow yourself to let go a little bit and experience this higher power that's there to only help you and only help humanity and help us have more meaning and definition and purpose and empowerment and all the good things that people talk about nowadays, and all the thought leaders and all the higher level conscious way of talking that's on the web and is currently growing all the time. But if you let yourself available to be a vessel for this spiritual light that's constantly manifesting in everyday life, then you can have a whole different level. And that's one of the things I think that would resolve a lot of the diversity, not the diversity in a negative way, but the divisiveness. Diversity is actually an amazing thing. The divisiveness that's being created right now by the media and the politics is really like the opposite of what that divine flow can be and bring us together. And it's almost like there's forces wanting us to not be aware of this divine flow. And also, even more important in my opinion, is to not realize how amazing we all are as humanity, that we're souls, that we have a divine essence to ourselves that gives us that ability to have a connection to the divine and make sense of this all. And that soul level is what I'm focusing on very much right now, because I feel like that is a solution to most of today's issues. I could almost say every issue.
I absolutely agree.
Yeah, I'm not...
No, I am right there with you. I'm right there with you. I believe if we can actually start looking from the soul level, and if you want to get angry at anybody, get angry at your higher self. Your higher self is the one that can be the masochist, because you're trying to get to this higher level of awareness. You're trying to get to this understanding. God just allows it to happen for our own soul growth. When we can get to the point where we truly can look at everything we've somehow have allowed it to be, and take responsibility. And there's ways, there's so many different ways of looking at it, but it's just like maybe we just gotta open it up a little bit more. So that's why I love what you're doing. I feel like we're kind of doing a similar thing, and I think maybe we're gonna need to talk about this a little bit more.
Yeah, we can always do a part two, no problem. Yeah, that's a good thing.
No, absolutely.
I've realized I'm writing a book now. Like, I've written a book and I'm taking it to a publisher, and I said to the publisher, this book literally is just a mission statement. It's not even like the beginning. It's just literally just the first line. Excuse me, I keep saying the word literally, but it's a book of literature. It's the beginning of the process of my mission statement to have this book out there, please God, and I'm sure with your book as well. And the key is to the way I approached it to the publisher. I'm not saying you should do this, but I would say this to people, to have that open mind approach of this might be just the beginning of a series. The same with the podcast. Like we don't have to do, also, like you said, not to limit God, not to limit ourselves, and allow ourselves to go with the flow and allow ourselves to begin projects and allow the flow to take over, that we can achieve much more than we even imagined with the projects, with the book, with the podcast, with the relationship. I don't want to limit my relationships with people. Even you mentioned about the soulmate before, like often we can get into habits, and there's good habits. I'm a very big fan of Stephen Covey's 7 Habits and 8 Habits, and I even wrote my own 10 habit version, and I have it in my head in my course, and it's one of my ways of thinking that's very helpful. But at the same time, there's a lot of habitual ways of being in relationships which limit your ability. And that's one of the things I've learned in business. Also, like throughout week after week, there's all the time stumbling blocks. People aren't doing what supposedly they're supposed to do in your business. I'm a director of a program, and there's people in the team who are not really functioning how I want, or people leave, people come. And I'm not responsible for those kind of decisions, but in terms of getting the content out to the world and putting on the events and the right now it's online events and online classes, which thank God, like one of our weekly classes get a minimum of 30,000 viewers. So that's, we're impacting people. It's making a difference. And I have to deal with all the impact in terms of the feedback and the questions, and I'm the MC. It's a lot of work for me. But I could get like very, upset with people when they're not doing their part, like in the studio or the video editing or the website posting or the YouTube posting, all the different aspects that are not working out exactly at the highest level that I'd want, and or even anyone our viewers would want. Sometimes we get feedback, why is this not happening, why not happening? And then we have the opportunity, how do I process this situation? Again, just like I mentioned with my friend back in the day, rather than turning it into a negative thing, like I'm going to be patient, I'm going to be encouraging, like these are godly attributes that I'm going to bring into my business work experience. That we, people would call it just being a good person, whatever, however you want to define it. But the bottom line is it creates good relationship experiences. And same with like the Zula space. Sometimes, you know, I come on there and in the meetings that we have, the private rooms, I don't even get to speak. And you know what? Like today, there was one meeting, they didn't even mention me. They didn't even notice me. Like they just were speaking and speaking.
Aww.
And you know what? I just felt like I was an active listener, but by just being there. And I've noticed sometimes just being present and being involved, I have an effect without even having to say something, and allowing things, not trying to force stuff, not trying to, you know, change in an aggressive way or a hustling way situations, allowing things to take part. You know, another business I'm involved in, I book artists, music artists. It's called Unity Bookings. It's part of my overall Unity Inspires projects. So I'm booking artists, and you know, there's still stuff that's going on to do with past cancellations, still going on. Since, you know, the Corona Challenge started in March, there's still stuff that needs to be taken care of that wasn't paid back or whatever. And I could get like all involved, and I could prove my point that I was right there, and I have photos of every single WhatsApp conversation at that point that I could send to the people and say, you look, see that other guy? He wasn't exactly this, and I was right. I could prove my point. But I'm not going to do it unless it's legally I need to, like there's some sort of legal reason for it. I'm not going to start pushing back on people, because my bigger mission is souls and creating a unity experience. We're together. We're a team. I'm not here to prove myself better than you. And I've noticed over the years, by constantly being loyal to people and always trying to just do the right thing in these kind of situations, in the long term, all my relationships have continued in business. And thank God I can feel like at peace with myself when I go to sleep or something, that I haven't burnt anyone. I haven't intentionally hurt anyone. And if there's anything that's seen that way, I've apologized. And, you know, we have like a festival in Israel that just was called Purim, which works out my birthday. And one of the things you do is you give presents to people. I went to the people about 12 years ago or more, maybe 14 years ago. I went to the people that literally threw me out this institute for no good reason. Yeah, I didn't do anything wrong. I actually ended up leaving myself more than they threw me out, but they're pretty much making it very difficult for me. I went to those people and gave them all gifts on that festival. I went out my way to their houses, even though I could have been very upset with them and bitter with them, and you know, and only years later did they finally realize how wrong they were and came and asked my forgiveness. But I'd already settled it years before. Like, you know, and this is the kind of thing with life. You get these opportunities and relationships. And one of the blessings I had to get back to the soulmate thing, is I had my soulmate throughout this whole journey. Like, I always had someone in my life who I could partner with in everything I was doing. And she knows all my stories. She remembers me when I used to run nightclubs in London. And I ran a nightclub called Pimps and Whores. Excuse my language, but that was the name. You know, I was a bit of a player back in London. So, and she was there at my night. She was at my, you know, event. You know, obviously I gave her, we weren't like going out, but there was a soul connection even then that I'd noticed. And even though I wasn't so soulfully attuned, but I just knew there was something very special about her. And I obviously got her into the party for free. She was one of the few VIPs I gave. And we ended up, our original time we met was in the gym, but we ended up becoming best friends from that gym meeting. And, you know, like, it's just amazing. I was 16 years old when I first spoke to her. The first time we actually met each other when I was 14.
Wow.
14. Yeah. And it was on a very special day in our calendar. It's called Yom Kippur. It's like the holiest day of the year. It's the one day you can't get Jeff on the internet. He takes the whole day off. Jeff Pulver is not on the internet for that one day. That's how holy that day is. Jeff Pulver is non-contactable on Yom Kippur. So I was at 14 years old going around the different places of worship. As I was a teenager, I wasn't really interested in worshipping. I was interested in socializing, yeah? So there is this pretty girl, and I was introduced, and we smiled. She apparently fell in love with me that first time she saw me. And that was how it always was. She always wanted to be my, you know, soulmate. She, from that 14-year-old meeting and 16-year-old when we first spoke to each other, and we just came closer and closer, and we got married when we were 21. So, you know, it's been 19 years. Yeah. I didn't have to go on.
That is so beautiful.
Yeah, I didn't have to go on dates like a lot of my friends. Like, you know, I'd had relationships before her, but it was all like in a different context. When I came to Israel for 3 years, we were both here and growing spiritually, and I just knew deep down that she was the one, and I didn't need to go on any dates or any headaches. It was just clear Myrony, serendipity. This is my soulmate.
Yeah. It's funny. My parents, they were married almost 43 years before my dad passed away. But it was the first time my dad met my mom. He said, "One day I'll marry you," and you know, it's just that you just know. And I love hearing stories like that. There's, I think one of the most beautiful books I've ever read about soulmates is called "Only Love Is Real" by Dr. Brian Weiss, and it kind of gives a different perspective on what are different levels of soulmates, because you know, we have soulmate friends, we have, you know, soulmates in so many different relationships, and I think even some of our soulmates are we're supposed to learn some lessons from. But when you can have that really beautiful, amazing connection, I mean, you can't deny that level of divine providence, as you as said before, and that's just so beautiful, and I'm just so happy for you both, because I think that's ultimately, if we can get to that point in being given that gift, that is amazing. And I also want to say everything that you've been talking about, you know, this whole, I love saying step aside, let God guide. It's not on our timing necessarily. It's on a much different divine timing, you know, but when we keep those doors open, or as you said, what Jeff told you, don't ever burn any of those bridges. It's like you just never know what the bigger picture is. And I like to say that the Myronies lead us to the pieces in this giant puzzle we call life, you know. And for people who are listening, it's just like, just be in action. You see those things, or that conversation, or, you know, just know there might be something so much greater. So that is awesome. Well, I want to get into more about the Unity Inspires projects, because I know there's so much to that. So please share.
Okay, I just want to say,
giant vision.
I want to say 2 more things that I think you'll appreciate, and then I'm happy to get into Unity Inspires project. Just with the soulmate aspect, you mentioned that you believe many people have many soulmates. So I want to just tell you, interestingly, it's good to know that we have a text called the Talmud. It's an ancient text, and it says there that every person has at least 7 soulmates. That's what it says in the ancient text. So obviously the ideal is to have the soulmate, like the one who's destined for you. But if those, for whatever reason, it doesn't work out, because, you know, these spiritual realms are complicated, and you end up in a different relationship with someone else because you didn't live up to your potential that was needed to be with that person, and therefore you were given another soulmate, but that's still your soulmate. That's the point. So when people go through many marriages or many relationships, it doesn't mean you've lost your soulmate. It doesn't mean that. And the real key is, and this is what we'll end off on this point, and we'll get to Unity projects, is that if a person's in touch with themselves, like really, you really know you, and you're really being real with yourself and facing your life issues and practicing, it's my belief totally you will be attracting your soulmate by doing that.
Yes, I agree.
And that's the same with, you know, your mission, and it's all very connected, you know, where you live and everything that makes a person's life. It's a lot, like you said before, the responsibility of a person to really deal with their baggage. You know, I could say it in ruder words, but the point is to deal with their stuff and to really face, you know. And once you get that soulmate, what happens is it sort of 10x's that experience, you know, like, or beyond even, like you on a daily level now, on a personal level, in your own space, constantly having to deal with real stuff, and you can't just escape. The key is that what you should realize that is the biggest gift. Like one of my friends said, you don't want a trophy wife, you want a wife that helps you get trophies. You don't want a husband who's gonna, like, you know, give you everything. You want a husband is gonna empower you to be, you know, whatever the soulmate is gonna build you. That's the point. And that is, it's a different way of thinking of, rather than trying to avoid the struggle, embrace the struggle, enjoy it, enjoy the challenges, enjoy this challenge we've had this last year, as hard as it is and tragic as it is. And that brings me now to my Unity project. So I was sitting working for corporate, and I was not enjoying the experience working for corporate America. Not that, all corporate America has to be this way, but the way it was being run in that specific company it just felt very suffocating, very not positive, empowering. It was a lot of people were taking good ideas that I had, higher management, using them in their name, and then those kind of experiences. And I was sitting in this little office doing this work for this company, and I was like, I know I'm meant for something more. This can't be my purpose to do this sort of painful job experience. And on the side, I was working on this blog called Unity Inspires Projects. I already did a concert called Unity of the bands, and I'd already made Unity events in Jerusalem for musicians, but I hadn't really scaled it because I'd just I've been busy working, and I hadn't taken it to that next step. So I started doing blogs, and that forced me to start to think about it more and more. And I think Unity in education, Unity in fashion, which funny enough, right now, one of my friends just sent me their book, which is very much connected to Unity in fashion. They even attribute me to something there and give a quote. And they're very much relating to that energy of creating that unity in fashion, unity in education, unity in marriage, unity in everything. I have my Unity Flow podcast now. I started slowly scaling it. And there were artists who wanted me to manage them and to book for them and speakers, and started to the point where I didn't need to work for this corporate company. But first, the Myrony was I needed some way to get out of this corporate company. So one of the things was I was moving from out of Jerusalem back to Jerusalem, and there was a company in Jerusalem wanted me to manage their customer service department. So I managed them, and I was able to then say bye-bye to the corporate. So it was a way out. And then over the road from the company I was managing was a recording studio. So now all the musicians would start to see me day to day, come in the store, because we were doing phones, electronics. And they came in, and the main guy who I ended up working with, Nissan Black, came, a hip hop artist, came in and said, Ellie, I want you to be my manager. Can you do both? I don't want to take you away from your current job because it's not scaled enough for my business, but I want you to be my manager. I said, yeah, I'll try to do both. And I did manage it for about 6 months. I managed to manage this company and manage an artist, but it got way too much because we were spending like in 1 week, we were 3 times over the Atlantic, on the planes, and
Oh, wow.
yeah, that amount of events were going on. We did an event in Times Square that same week. It was massive. Stuff was developing, and I couldn't hold on to a position and manage an artist. So I chose the artist. And then after a few months of that, I realized this is just too much. So I chose to just be a booking agent. And I can focus on the unity aspect. What would that mean? Instead of just building this artist, which is what managing an artist is about, I could build my own agency and product and build my own personal brand, which the coronavirus challenge this year has only sped up that focus, as I'm sure you can relate, because you have much more time to reflect and much more time to plan your own, development, instead of just all the other people I was busy helping develop through bookings and other projects. And one of the things I've realized that in order to really help other people truly, I'm going to have to first get myself more unified, more united, more together. And that meant my marriage had to become more important. My children had to become more important. My family life, my health, my lifestyle had to be more enhanced. And I had to develop more real relationships with people like yourself, and not just, these one-off whatever, just making a booking and doing a gig. It had to be real relationships. Same with my clients, and same with all the people I talk to online, that if they send me something, I have to respond in an authentic, real way, and treat people how I'd want to be treated, and all this kind of stuff. I really worked hard on it to the point where the concept of Unity Inspires Projects is now manifesting in real time. It's not just a theory. I'm trying to live this now, and I think that's a big point to a lot of people in business and podcasting or whatever they're doing. It's not enough to talk the talk. You got to walk it. You got to live it and make it into your daily plan. How are you going to manifest this? So one of the ways was to write a book every day, and that was thanks again to our Zula meetings, and now writing a book, like I said before, became my mission statement of wow, what am I going to do? But like I said, the goal is to have a series and once I've got myself clear, then I can be collaborative to other people. That's the idea, that the more your mission, like I see with that's Myrony, you've got your mission clear. Now you can in a clear way, in a simple way, include other people into that, and it's not too much. And that's something which is, I'm watching you and learning from that. And the more and more in our network, the more the people we're meeting who doing it they've already done it in their way, like their brand, their project. You can start to understand, like, for example, when you look in the podcasting world, and I think that's a very important way of communicating now. Joe Rogan, for example, that authentic conversation that he's having with people, and for hours, the long form of just chilled conversation, not too much pressure and not too much marketing and higher ups getting involved and Hollywood getting involved, just a very real conversation. No like agendas, just very authentic. And that kind of media is very attractive to me. And I think one of the reasons it is, and I would say again for many other podcasters like Tim Ferriss, Tom Bilyeu, Lewis Howes, all these kind of guys out there, there's a few lady ones I listen to, I'm just trying to remember, and their names, for some reason it's gone out of my head, but there's the, If Not Now Then When, that podcast, and there's a bunch of, Oprah, of course, is always someone I've listened to over the years. But the point is that with all these people out there, what I've understood is that there's an awakening of consciousness that people want to communicate and connect. And one of the ways is through this podcast format. Why would they sit and listen to us? Because we're having a conversation, and I want you to come back to me in what I'm saying. I want to just keep talking. Because the conversation aspect, no, it makes it real. Like it brings it like.
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
It really, we never, see, the thing is I never actually know what we're ever going to really talk about. I love that. I truly love that. I try to keep it as organic as possible and let it happen the way it's meant to happen. And, I feel like, I'm sure you kind of feel the same way. You're just a messenger here in this time to be showing something in a different light. And we're both trying to show God and higher spirituality in a different light than maybe what we've been accustomed to, and that's actually even though my last name is pronounced Myronuk and people have these Myronic experiences, I give all the humor to that of God.
Sure.
How I happen to be born with that name, but I don't look at it as my word. I look at it as everybody's word because it's my irony, but we take out the I because it's not about I, it's about we, and it's about something so much greater. And my vision is to see people share their Myronies in addition to their selfies on social media and being able to connect on that level. And that's actually why this podcast is the way that it is. It's to show these level of connections, like how did that happen? So like to hear how you connected to Jeff, which is how we connected, is so incredible because, I only know him virtually, but I do feel like he's a true friend because I've had those conversations. And, and it's like, I know our conversations are going to continue because what you are truly creating and with Unity inspires, like, it is all about inspiring and thinking, how can we start having everybody be raised to this higher level of consciousness? And when we can start looking at it more as this, we're having this spiritual experience in a human existence. Sure. And I live my life so much by that. I'm always looking at what is my higher self trying to show me, teach me. How can I help others? And I truly believe, we're here. We go through what we go through. Like I actually, you've listened to my podcast, but I believe I've gone through all the trials and tribulations solely that I can help others. Because how else could I help others unless I've gone through it?
Sure. That's it. It's real life. It's real content. It's real connection. And that realness is what people are thirsty for, like the fake media or whatever they call. I don't like using these terminologies, but the way the world has gone in terms of the mainstream stuff is very not real, and therefore people are sort of distancing from that and wanting real content. Like, I follow a bunch of different podcast shows in England, and like, they're not my culture. Like, we're talking about, you know, like one of the shows I follow, a guy called Chucky Online. It's you know, I'm gonna just say it what it is. It's black culture, yeah, and it's very cool. All hip hop, house, dance, kind of famous boxers, and like that kind of culture from London. And I was part of that a little bit growing up, because I didn't grow up in the Jewish world. I grew up in more like a mix of everybody. Thank God I had a very unified upbringing, and I went to school with all kinds of different religions and cultures, and you know, a lot of refugees from Somalia came when I was at school. So I met Somalians, and I met Brazilians, and I met, in my school there was so much, because I went to a public school. I wasn't in the private system, even though my parents could have afforded it. But for some reason my parents wanted me to have a different experience in life, and I appreciate that. And it's given me ability to connect to all kinds of people. And the rabbi I work for, he's all about connecting to every kind of people, not just the Jewish people. And he's a visionary in the Jewish world of trying to get the Jewish people to think in a bigger way, that we have a message not just to our own people, and to heal from all our struggles. We've gone through the Holocaust, gone through this, gone through that, Israel, and all the struggles that the state goes through. We have a bigger vision of connecting to the world with light and spiritual energy and positive messages of how to live a more happy, fulfilled life. That kind of message. So I'm very happy to work for a rabbi like that, and I'm very happy to help him and his studio classes and bring all kinds of musicians and guests. We've had all different cultures and minorities there, and it's really amazing to manifest this in a weekly level in my studio in Jerusalem, but also to manifest it through music. I have 2 collaboration albums and 1 collaboration EP out of all different artists, you know, men, women, all different styles of music, and I'd like to do more. This is just the beginning. I hope to have another one out in the summer again, and thank God people are reaching out to me with their music and their tracks. And some of them are artists who are just beginning, and some of them are established artists, and I think it's good to bridge them all and give everyone equal opportunity in music. And in terms of you know, how to bring it out more, I think the only way I can, once I put out my book, please God, to go the next level will be with what you're doing today, which is basically to collaborate. Because I can't, there's only so much, I have what I want to say, but I look a certain way. I'm living in Jerusalem. People are going to like, oh, he's in a box, he's in Israel, he's part of that thing. And one of the things I enjoyed hanging out with Jeff was I always try to break those definitions. Wait a minute, this guy like isn't in that box. And wait a minute, he grew up there and he was with Led Zeppelin, or, you know, with Lenny Kravitz, and, you know, whatever musician you're into, music style, he was with those people. And, you know, Stevie Wonder and Paul McCartney, and that was my upbringing, and David Bowie, and like, you know, the Queen, and, you know, all the different things I experienced. And I don't mean the royalty, because I also met the Queen as well, but like, I'm not talking about like all the different levels. I remember one of the funniest parties I went to was Prince William's birthday party, yeah, and I met a very nice blonde girl there who fell for me, and I wrote a song called Emily, and I changed. My wife doesn't like it when I bring this story up, but then I changed the song to Family, and it's out there, the song Family. I put it out on SoundCloud, and it's now on Spotify. I've recently released my only album that I ever did. It's a bit old school, but I put it out on Spotify, and there's a song called Family, but it was originally Emily. You know, not many people know that, but it was thanks to my interesting upbringing. And that's where we start to see a very larger picture of Myrony, or divine providence, or serendipity, where everything starts to come together. We start to see how every single experience you had as a kid now, or every single person you were blessed to know growing up with, has a significance even now. Like, and I try make a big effort to reach out to those people practically, even now. Like Emily, I haven't heard from years. If she's out there, you know, send regards. But I mean, like, other than that, like those experiences, like one of my best friends was with me that night, and we're still friends, you know. We were just recently Zoom chat each other and had a great catch up. And, you know, he was there with me in those days. And we're still, best friends now. And I think it's really important that you maintain your relationships and you see how those experiences are formational, and that's on an individual level, but on a larger level, communal level, the ability to take it to the next level. I didn't have your experiences, so I can't impact your sphere of influence like you can, and I can't impact someone else's sphere of influence. So the only way we're really going to unify is to learn how to communicate on a soul level and to really get connected more. And that's like a project I think we all need to engage in, and we need to use the social media tools to enhance that, not to, God forbid, like they're saying in the Social Dilemma documentary, make it worse. Like the algorithms are against us. We need to actually do something about that in a proactive way. There's all this activism now, cancel culture, all this stuff going on. We need to be much more proactive in how we're going to connect. How is the left and the right going to communicate? How is this and that? What is the wavelength where they can communicate? And that's where I think if people would realize that they have a soul, then and that soul is so vital to their existence and to their life and their relationships, that they can then start to learn the communication of soul. And that would be something which I need help in. I can't do that alone because I'm only one soul. It's going to take a collective.
I agree. It's all about collaboration when we want to look at this. If we really want to impact the world and impact humanity in a different level. And it's funny how you keep bringing up box, because that's what I keep saying that I'm trying to do, is break God out of this box, and if people aren't okay with saying God, that's okay too. It's wherever people are really at. It's like if you're comfortable saying universe because of religion, you weren't able. I was one of those people, but I was shown something totally different, and that's another whole conversation of why I'm a huge advocate of trying to show God in this different light. And and the Myronies are we can connect the dots, but I love to say there are spiritual breadcrumbs. And sometimes it's literally the smallest crumb that will have the biggest impact and will literally create the miracles in our lives and in others. And if we can all start connecting on that greater level. So I just love what you're doing. I know I definitely want to have you back on.
Thank you.
For more conversation about this, because I think you and I are very similar in a lot of ways, of where we're just trying to really bring a different awareness. And that's why I say discover Myrony in your inner superpower. I call it my spiritual spidey sense, because I do everything based on intuition, in the sense of like something happens and I'm like, oh, okay, what's that next door gonna open? But when we can really live from that place of our soul and our higher selves, and also this divine, this beautiful, and I love, as you say, divine providence, because that is, I truly believe that's us having this conversation today. So
I appreciate it. I mean, like one of the things I'd want to discuss at another time would be like the recovery world, and there's so much you can learn from that world, and how they have to seek that higher power to overcome their addictions. And like now with technology, how do we deal with this? There's so many different platforms of discussion that we could do that could help people if we're just given that time and opportunity to get that information out there.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's just one idea.
No.
Yeah. I mean, I have a whole plan, an online recovery center, but like with opportunity for people to communicate more in private ways. And I have a lot of visions that I'd love to put into reality. It just needs very realistic, scalable, executionable opportunities how to do it. So that's why I'm very much right about with process and taking my time. And as much as I have a lot to do, I'm not going to rush it. And that's why I appreciate you guys giving us the time to talk this. We already did so much. I mean, it's almost an hour, and that's amazing, So thank you.
I know, it has been amazing. And with what you're talking about with the recovery, I mean, I had to deal with prescription drug addiction and pretty severe alcohol abuse too. But it wasn't until I was able to connect to that higher way of looking. And that's actually another thing that I do. I call it my Myrony mentoring, where I show people what I did, but I'm like, here, let me give you a blueprint, a very simple way, and it's through books and it's through experience. And when people say, what are your credentials? I say life. When you get to the point where you do want, if you get to the point where you're about to take your life, it doesn't matter how you get there. I also believe in the other side. It doesn't matter how you get to God as long as you get to God. Whatever that is, just know that, or just open up the door of something greater than just ourselves. But I love. I wanted to get into actually how you're known as the Midnight Rabbi, because
yeah, that connects into the recovery aspect, because it's a cool name, because I was with at-risk teenagers on the streets late at night, and it really was a hard 4 or 5 years of not sleeping in my bed. And my wife can testify, bringing up little kids without me there most nights, and I literally was just helping, excuse to use that word again, but I was really trying to just connect with the teenager culture at that time and understand them and connect with them and give them that time where they were more relaxed and less on guard, or a lot of them were on American hours because they were American at-risk teenagers in Jerusalem at the time, and they were on up all night, sleeping all day. Like, I wanted to be there, and I now have my own teenage kids. That's my excuse. I say to people, I've got my own. I'm not at risk, but borderline. They're having their struggles, and I need to be there for them right now more than what's out on the streets. So, but it definitely gave me insight, and working in a rehab as well was an amazing opportunity. And I feel that there's so much we can do for the new generation, is to give them just tools of awareness. Like the fact that my oldest son, even though he's going through teenage struggles, but he always comes out with an awareness that this is from a higher power, and the only way he's going to overcome his struggles, his whatever, I don't want to get into it's not for me to publicize, but his struggles, the only way is through the higher power. And he's constantly aware of that and teaching it with to other people who don't even have any belief, even if it's a police officer who's trying to arrest him or whatever, he'll try and teach them then, or whatever it is, whatever scenario that comes up, he's constantly saying, but I see this as Myrony, I see this as a divine experience, and I'm going through my struggles and I accept where I'm at, and it's amazing to have children that have that awareness. I have a daughter that's married, and she has that awareness that all that she's going through is, with that divine awareness. And for me, the fact they have a relationship, even if they're not the most religious looking people like in the world, in terms of the Jewish, standards, because they're very high standards. If you would know how they, like every culture has its standards, and its rule book, like the royalty has their standards. So in the Jewish world, there's that as well. And even though it's BS, but it has its use as well, for positive stuff as well, making boundaries. Like, there's some good aspects to it as well. But my kids don't exactly at the top of that in terms of the external aspect, but the internal, the relationship that they have. And that for me is that is proving my point. Same with a lot of my students and people that I connect with, my friendships. It's about real relationships. Just like a relationship with a higher power is real relationships. And that is the key to really healing a lot of this. And that's why I have another podcast called Relationship Flow, because it's all just about, right now I'm talking about intimacy right now, and how all the different aspects of intimacy, how it has to be very focused, experience that soul connection. And it's something which is, it's hard to explain in a podcast format, but I'm working on it week by week, 10 minutes a week. And I'd do more if I had more, infrastructure, but I'm happy right now to just do baby steps,
Yeah, well, you are really here to inspire and transform the world. So I feel so honored and truly blessed to have had this conversation with you. So what's the best way for people to connect with you?
So unityinspiresprojects@gmail.com is always welcome. Anyone can reach out like you did so much. And also my LinkedIn account is how we met through, my profile is Ellie Goldsmith, and also Twitter is Goldsmith Ellie. My Instagram, Unity Inspires Projects. I have a bunch of other accounts and with different projects I've been involved with, but that's the main one that I'd like to share here. And I'm also on YouTube. I have a YouTube channel, also Unity, Ellie Unity Goldsmith, and a bunch of other channels that are connected in with larger and larger subscription there. And there's TikTok and all the different brilliant apps. I've even started turning up on what's that new one, the Clubhouse and Stereo, and there's so much. It's getting a bit overwhelming. But I think that the podcast format is amazing. I've just managed to transfer my podcast account to WordPress. I don't know if you know that you can do that, but it automatically transferred all my podcasts to WordPress so that it turns into a blog format. So all your notes, everything.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I'm working with an app called Anchor app. I was recommended to it by Gary V, one of Gary V's posts on LinkedIn. I took note, and he always seems to be ahead of the game. So I went on to Anchor app a bunch of years ago, and now what they've just done the last few weeks is you can transfer your whole podcast repertoire onto a blog format of WordPress, and then you can obviously upgrade it and do better and better tools of it. But it does it automatically. It's amazing. So all my podcasts now, 3 of them, are now as blogs as well. So.
Oh wow! I gotta do the same thing then, because that's another great medium. So
yeah.
Well, Ali, thank you so much. I definitely would love to have you back in the future for sure. And to everyone, that's Myrony. See you next time.
Thank you so much. All the best.